Today, we're going to touch really lightly on what's offered in this census. There was a session today that some of you have we've chatted a bit about being on Roots Tech, and it was about 30 minutes and it was really well done. And then there are a number, I saw 4 or 5 at least, about more specific things on Roots Tech. And they were about an hour tomorrow and the next day, each of them. So what we're going to be covering is going to be a real snapshot of the 50 census. What you have here is a picture of President Harry Truman and his wife and daughter in Key West, Florida, being actually enumerated in the census for the 1950 census. This enumerator on the left actually had no warning that she was going to be enumerating the President of the United States, and she did a great job, and they look quite relaxed as they did that. We can see many of your faces here. Wave your hand if you would, and we sort of touched on this too, if you are going to be on this 1950 census.
Hope to.
Good for you guys.
Yay.
Yeah, that's great. So you definitely will want to be seeing your first snapshots there. So let's dig in, Brother Perkins.
Okay, there we go. This is going to be one of the most comprehensive census that they've ever taken. Not only are they going to have all 49 continental United States in there, they're also going to have the territories, Alaska, Hawaii, and several other territories that are part of the United States that they watch after, like Puerto Rico and so forth. And they're going to also have other parts of it that are going to tie into it. And Sister Perkins is going to talk about several of the other ones.
So I need to have this slide up, and we may have been able to have actually sent it out to you yesterday. Most of the materials here, I'm a librarian, and so it was very difficult for me to do this without putting footnotes on every one of these slides on where everything came from. Suffice it to say that the research and all of these great pictures and graphs are from one of these sources. If you didn't get yesterday's slide, then we'll just send it out again. The first book that we used was the census book, Facts, Schedules, and Worksheets from the US Censuses by Dollarhide. This is sort of the Census Bible, we found out. When we were asked to do this, we were very nervous because we're like, we really don't have that much experience with the census. But looking at Dollarhide's material really covered the basics and the intermediates for all of the censuses. So you might want to peek at that. The second thing we used was from Fold 3, which is an Ancestry subsidiary. And I know, Brother Hauser, you'd seen this, the 1950 US Census and Military Research article that they did about 2 weeks ago. Excellent, excellent article. You could take a peek at that. Getting ready for the 1950 census, searching with and without a name index. And we'll talk about why that is by Morse and Weintraub. Never had heard of those two until we started doing our research. And it's like, oh my goodness, these two have spent 10 years getting ready for the next census for the last 2 experiences. And they have some of the best tools, even after the name index is out, that you can use to find locations for your census people. Weintraub also, number 4, has a series of YouTube videos, probably 20, 25 of them, about various censuses and specifics. You might want to look at those. They are excellent. And then, of course, number 5, the mother lode, the National Archives 1950 census. And there's the address for that. And you'll definitely be jumping into there on April 1st. Today at Roots Tech, like we were talking, there's several sessions with Lisa Louise Cook with an E, including the 4 o'clock one today, preparing for the 1950 census. She had about 10 minutes in the middle of that. She does a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful podcast. So you might want to watch that. You can either watch it free or you can get it with the specials that are associated with it by paying into that. So look through Roots Tech, because those sessions will be available all for a whole year to do that. If you notice on the bottom right-hand corner, really small of this particular slide, there's a number 3. We numbered our slides, and the reason for that is it will help you with the oh buts that come up. Oh buts are when you see us doing something, saying something, or you have a question about it, or you go, no, 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 I know that they do that differently, or you might want to correct this, or you have a question or suggestion. You probably have 10 things you want to say already. If you'd save them to the end, we were careful and tried to time this no more than 30, 32 minutes. We should have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end. If you can put those questions in the chat section on here, or jot it on a piece of paper and say, slide 3, here's a question I have. Slide 16, here's a question I have. And Brother Johnson's going to be taking care of sort of looking at those, like if our sound goes off or something.
This is a picture of what the census document looks like, the one that most everything is going to be dealt with. As you see, there's some highlighted lines in there. On the one particular one is line 4, and there's several other those. We're going to talk about those later because they do have some significance in what's going on the census. So the first part of the census up on top, everybody's going to be filling out information, or information's going to be filled out for them, such as the street name, apartment number, and so forth. Now, the serial number is the sequential number of the houses or apartments in that enumeration district. So it'll make it easy for you to follow through and see there's several houses before this particular house that you're in, or afterwards, or if it's at the beginning of the enumeration district. The other information is a agricultural questionnaire number, and that was put in there by for people who have farms or acreage in the city limits, for instance, and they took all that information and collaborated it all into one document. There's a out there that you can look at and tells you all the information about farms in the area. Nothing significant, nothing that would identify especially with a particular farm or whatever else. As it continues on, they all the same things. They ask relationships to the household, sex, birthday, how old they were at their last birthday, marital status, so forth, nationality, whether they're foreign born or not. Then it starts asking questions about the 14-year-olds and older. And these are all kind of work questions that deal with what's gone on in the individual throughout the year before, or there's other places where it's earlier. So that just gives you an idea of what's going on with them with their work. The next one is sort of an occupation. Again, it deals with whether they work or not. And the enumerators were challenged that they try to make these things look logical. In other words, you don't have a barber working in a jewelry shop, working on a farm or something. And that way that they can make sense of the information, and it isn't erroneous or anything else. It's more correct. We talked about those rows, and as you can see on here, there's a number by their like 4, 9, 11, and so forth, those are identified as specific additional questions asked to those people only. And it goes into how long the person's lived in that house, and whether they lived in the same country or not, and information of that sort. It also asks the nationality of the father, how much schooling the person's had, did they finish school, so forth. And then it asks employment information, how much they worked, what they earned, and so forth about the individual. And then it goes on to ask questions specifically about the household, whether the people in the household, how much money they earned also. Yes.
Sorry. As we were preparing for this, as you could imagine, asking people their income was suddenly viewed. It was the first time they'd done that, and it was suddenly viewed as a very intrusive question.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. And I mean, I was like, well, that's interesting, especially since the enumerator might be somebody you know, and somebody might in the office. It could be very intrusive. So what they did, just as an aside, what they did was shortly into the census taking, when they got to that section, if the person said, oh, I'm uncomfortable giving that information, they were given another piece of paper that they filled out and mailed in. And that they were pretty effective on getting those answers in there. It was good demographic information for the uses of the census, but I was sort of reassured, that they didn't really have to put down in front of the enumerator. They didn't have to specify that. But that was an interesting aside. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
It just burst out of me.
The next question that was asked of them was about their military service. If the person had spent any time, World War I, World War II, or any service at all. And then it gets into specific questions. The last person, the sixth person that they enumerated that fell into this additional questions group, was also asked a few additional questions relating to their work employment, and it just is pretty basic here. But they asked them that these questions just to get additional information on work history and so forth. And they also asked at the very final one here is if it was a female, their marital status and how many children that they had that were not stillborn. Mr. Perkins.
I think it's pretty interesting. Brother Perkins, how many people did they get counted on the 1950 census?
Was it 151 million?
Yeah. And they figured how previous censuses they figured were approximately 18% to 20% accurate for the numbers. What did they figure this one?
1.4%.
1.4%. So what you're going to hope is that your family got caught on the census and enumerated. But frankly, I hope that my heads of household might hit those 5 sample lines, because they got asked all those additional questions that were very specific and really could give a good picture. Do you agree?
Yes.
What's the chance of that?
What, 1 in
3?
1 in, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the census helps determine the number of members to the federal and to the state House of Representatives for and within each state. And many budgets and services and monies come from the federal government and state and local census information. So they want that census accuracy to be as correct as they can. The next quote came from 11's with Lisa, that Lisa Cook. She said, census, and I liked the way she put this, census records serve as benchmarks. They pinpoint particular ancestors' locations and family status in the timeline of their lives. The latest one, the 1940 census that was released in 2012, since that time, we've had opportunities to comb through the census hundreds and maybe thousands of times and learn all we can about our family members who were enumerated. The 1940 census gave us a glimpse into the lives of our ancestors who were at the time mere months away from the life-changing events of World War II. So right at that tail end of the Depression, right at the beginning of 1950, we've got just a tremendous amount of change that occurred in the world that's shown in the 1950 census snapshots. There's going to be lots of different information. Unfortunately, there's going to be the deaths of the people that served in the military. They're going to not be on the census anymore. So you may not find them, and that might be a reason why their death or missing that happened. The mobility of people has changed tremendously from 1940 to 1950, from an agrarian to definitely more urban. The GI Bill opened up tremendous opportunities for college attendance, and we'll talk about how the students are enumerated differently now in 1950. The financial change that occurred, that the incomes that happened, just all kinds of things happened in that 10-year period. Now, we would all love to just April 1st sit down and put in your name, and Brother Hauser put in your name and have it show up. And it probably won't work that easily. But there's a few tricks that between Lisa Cook and between the suggestions made by the work that's done by Weintraub and Morse, we have some suggestions on we're just going to quickly overview to look at. So April 1st, 12 o'clock, the huge data dump will occur of that information from the National Archives. There is, and I'm going to make this definition now, there is the name search option that for the first time in the census release that might work for your family. And the first name search opportunity, hopefully, will come from the National Archives themselves having a name search. And I just added this slide in as I got the information more available yesterday. So I apologize for it being nothing but words. But in December 2021, the National Archives put out this notice that, yes, it's going to be image only, so you'll see the actual pages, but there's nothing to put a name in to search on it when they did the 1940 census. If you remember, they thought it was going to take 6 months for the indexers to do that name search, and it actually was, what, 4.5 months. So that was impressive. So that is how it should be, except down in the lower section, the new census from the National Archives will have search capabilities. And I'm sort of excited about this because technology has taken a huge step here. There will be a first pass already done by the National Archives. I'm going to refer to them as NARA from now on. That is done by AI, ML, and OCR. Now, what does that mean? AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning, and OCR, optical character recognition, where the computer that NARA has will do a first pass and have a separate section to search by name, hopefully on April 1st. Wow, that's ginormous. That's a game changer. And if it's accurate, you might find your name. Now, the reality is, this is the second part of it, the last paragraph. For the first time, not only is the NARA going to try to run that, but they're going to have somehow magically, I don't know because I can't see it because it's not open yet, they will have a way where there can be corrections to the index that's currently in the search, in the name search.
That would be wonderful.
Doesn't that sound amazing? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Now, that's what the 4 o'clock meeting was recruiting people to do, was to be not only indexers, but more importantly, reviewers. And reviewers are ones who are going to be submitting to, I don't know how, the National Archives and saying, my maiden name, Colbart's, imagine spelling that, correcting the 5 or 6 different ways that Colbart's was spelled. And hopefully that will work. So NARA is going to have a first pass supposedly ready the 1st of April, when the big 100 and some billion quadrillion, it's on the next slide. Oh, there it is, 165 terabytes of data. NARA is going to have that first pass name search done separately that could be corrected. Now, right behind them, at 1201.1.1.1.1, Ancestry and Family Search will be downloading the same 165 terabytes. And when they do that, they will also be doing a name search, because we know that there's oopses that occur on any kind of computer, artificial intelligence. So what we can do beforehand, that first slide of Clark's that you saw is from the National Archives. You can go on their website right now and print out a blank copy of the page from the 1950 census. And you can be ready for that census to come out and do that first search for your name by looking at the information that you can access. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at quadrillions of pages of raw data, the actual pages from the census. And so how do you know where to look? That's what the talk's about. So you need to have, if you want to get your information on the 1st of April or therearound, within the first month or two, you need to have the names and addresses of those people you want to see immediately. Brother Hauser, you might want to have your address of where you think you were living in when you were just a tiny little one in 1950. When you put it in there, check the variables of your spelling. Check if you can't find it under your name or the correct variables or varied variables. If you know the name of a neighbor, I think of the farm down the street from us, Charles Trantina. And so yesterday I looked him up on the 1940 census and he was there. So I'm thinking, okay, if I can't find my Colbart's in 1950, I'm going to check Chuck Trantina's farm and see if I can find him. Because once I find him in those 165 terabytes, once I find one person that I know where they are, I can go, okay, that's number 1 family, that's number 4 family, that's number 6 family, and hopefully find them. You can do the same with businesses if you were in a city. If you knew that there was a school or a business within a couple blocks of your home, get that address, get that name, and then you can search them if you can't find your particular one. But worst comes to worst, if you can't find your family where they should be, here's a few reasons why they might not be there. Maybe they just weren't home that day. Maybe the whole family went to visit Mary, who had a baby, and she lived in another county. And so nobody was home that day. So your enumerator may have stopped at the next house and got their information and said, hey, Colbart's aren't home next door. Do you happen to know where they are? Well, that was who farm sat for us when we went out of town. So they'd say, yeah, they're there, but they're not home today. We're farm sitting for them. They'll be home next week. So the numerator may have left some empty lines on that original form. And so you may see that there may be some missing lines, and hopefully it's your family that should go there. Now, there's 27 pages of directions for the enumerators, and you can read them, the 1950 enumerated directions. They're supposed to go back if the family's not there. First, they ask the neighbors. Now, do you really want your neighbors giving your information? They don't know the accuracy. So your enumerator is supposed to go back at least once, some did more, and try to fill in anybody that's absent. And so if they left those lines blank, they'll just put them in there and they'll be in the order that you wanted them to be. Or that's what they were supposed to do in 1950. Or this next sentence, I'm sorry, is what they're supposed to do in 1950. At the end of their enumeration district, they're supposed to put in the people who were missing that they caught on their second or third run. So if you don't find them in the order of their address, look at the end of that enumeration district and see if that address isn't written in and then your family's stuck in there. That could be very helpful. So it could be at the end of the list. It could be in the blank spaces that they left. Hopefully you'll find them in one of those. Now, if you have no luck, down where it says no luck, there may be transient places that they were listed at. For example, my grandfather was sort of a wanderer, and he didn't really, by 1950, he didn't really have a location where he was living, renting, owning, and they don't have those designations in this census. But my grandfather lived as a farm worker. And so he is often missed in he was missed in the 1920 census, the 1930 census, and the 1940 census. But he may show up on some extra schedules that they had for the 1950 census. And so they didn't go to places like prisons as often. They didn't go in 1940 and earlier to places like poorhouses, orphanages. They did some, but not as many as they could have. They didn't go to a lot of these other kinds of places where people might be. Like last year, when they were doing the census, they actually had snapshot nights. And I think that's an important thing to remember too, that in the 1950 and beyond census, they had snapshot nights where they would actually go to homeless encampments, hobo camps, whatever they call them, and they would do the homeless that were there or the prison. So there are schedules that were done separately. And I think it was like on April 9th, they did it in the 1950 census I read. That was their national transient snapshot. And that's when they would go to these extra places with extra enumerators. Maybe your family had some of those types of circumstances that were there. The sad thing about that is that those transient schedules were destroyed after they were put in the totals. So not all of those extra schedules were actually microfilmed after the enumeration was done. Doggone. Another change too, and I mentioned this a little, and Clark did too, they may have been on a ship. Now, during the 1940 census, if you were in the Navy, you didn't get counted as a general rule. If you were on a military installation out of the country in 1940, you generally didn't get counted. If you were stationed in Guam or Panama Canal, you didn't get counted. But in 1950, they changed that. So most of those situations, when they were in ship assigned to a lighthouse from the Coast Guard, if they were on a military installation or their family was assigned to the military installation with them, they had separate schedules and they were counted as in the census too. Some of those separate schedules have survived and some were destroyed when they destroyed the information after the microfilming is done. So that's an improvement. And that's one of the reasons that it went from that 18 down to like almost 2% accuracy. Now, this is a huge change. I said earlier, are they in college? You've got this giant influx of people serving in the military and now having the GI Bill. So this one, previous to 1950 and all the ones earlier, if you were in college, when they came to your home of residence, your mom and dad, your sisters and brothers, whomever you lived with, that's where they enumerated you in those older censuses. But in 1950, the enumeration occurred on campus, not at home. Even married student housing occurred on campus and not at home. So if you're looking through and you can't find an 18, 19-year-old sibling that should have been, that's part of that family, and they're not listed, you might think, well, maybe they're in college. Unfortunately, then you have to try to find them on the college. I just wait until the name searches came out. But if you can't, maybe they're at college. Even if they were home for vacation or on a break, they still were supposed to be counted on the separate schedules, which you just never really know. So of course, there's going to be these mistakes during misspellings as the computer's doing this. The AI and the OCR, they're reading these, they're going to misspell, they're going to make an oops, they're going to be doing that all electronically. It might be hard to decipher handwriting, like we never see that on censuses. There might be a smudged page, there is issues with the transcriptions, but no matter what, whether when you access that, whether through Family Search or Ancestry, your best chance of finding them is to have the enumeration districts. So I'm going to just spend a couple minutes talking about enumeration districts. Beginning in the 1880 census, each official census was taken by assignment to the geographic area, and the geographic area is the enumeration district. Personally, I hope that my family's always on a farm, because it's a lot easier to find them on farms than it is in a city, but you get what you get. As a result, the census pages are organized by enumeration districts. And so to find your relatives, you're first going to need to locate this. If you don't find them in that name search, you're first going to need to know the state they lived in, and then the county, and then their address. And I'll show you what the 1940 census looked like. If you hopefully have lots and lots of good luck, if you have good luck, you have enumeration districts that didn't change much. And hopefully they didn't, your family didn't move much. This is a 1940 census page, and up in the yellow highlighted section there, that shows the enumeration district. Since 1930, I think it was, 1930, each enumeration district for the state has a separate number. Now, every state's going to have number 1, number 2, number 3. So you have to look at them to know which state, and this doesn't include, this is a 16th census, 1940. It doesn't say right here on this page for you to see which state it is, but you can see that further over on the left. But every state, the first thing they did in 1930 is they started at 1 and they numbered all of their counties. And I don't even know how many counties are in Texas.
A lot.
Okay, let's pretend there's 150 counties in Texas. And so it would go from 1 to 150. I remember California, so I should use that. California went from, in 1930, from number 1 to number 54. There were 54 counties in California. So the first 2 numbers on the left is the county number. So if I think this might be Alabama. So the first 2 numbers, 39, is the county numbers. The next number is the arbitrary numerical enumeration district. To find your sheet, you have to have both numbers to find your sheet. And then you can find, hopefully, your family, because you don't want to be looking through 165 million tetrabytes of pages to find it. So this can get you first to your state, then to the county, 39. But what happened between 1930 and 1940 is states like California realized that they were going to have counties that had hundreds and hundreds of enumeration districts. Enumeration districts are pretty small. And so they started, county with county 39, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the size and density of that county. So the second number is the enumeration district. And here's what enumeration districts look like in a smallish town in Alabama. So you see, does this show up my mouse? Does my mouse show up? Somebody?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the enumeration district for Alabama, the city of Florence in Lauderdale County. There are 39 counties that are listed in Alabama, and this is the 1950 census. But what happened is, like in California, 1 through 54 are your counties. And then in 1940, they said, we have to break some of these cities out. So 5 cities became their own county-like enumeration. So they added 5 or 6 more cities to that 54. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fresno, a couple more of the big cities. So you can't assume, my whole point is you can't assume that the 1930, the 1940 is going to be the same enumeration district county number as it was in the previous census. Doggone it. That's not very nice, but that's how life works. Take me back. Okay, so I do need to go back though, Clark, if you could get it to go back.
Nope.
So the next slide that you can't see, I'm sorry that I jumped ahead like that. The next slide that you can't see, there it is what you do when you don't have an easy way to find your enumeration district. You go to the Morse and Weintraub website and you put in your state and you put in your county and you put in your city, and it will get you, click your enumeration district maps. It will bring you 1 to 5 suggestions from various locations. It's gone through the NARA maps. It's gone through other maps that are available. These guys have spent tons of time doing this. And then when you select that, you pull up this particular slide. So if you know that your family lived someplace in this block, and you will have put that in that last slide, it will tell you, okay, there'll be a little mark right there. And then you know that it's Alabama, enumeration district 39 for Lauderdale County, and enumeration district within that county of 35, 39-35. There's 34, 32, and you can see it pulls it right down to it. It's hard to do, but it's doable. Here's the one that I say I like, because this is when you look at this and you're not looking at a city. So if, well, where'd it go?
You get something.
Okay, my hand's right here. So if you, it's okay. If you are not in a city and you're in the country, here's your country map. And so you know, okay, we lived along this road before this road. And so we're in enumeration district 39 county, and 53 is the ED. So that's an example, and you get that again off that Weintraub and Morse site. Personally, I hope that those are the ones that you find them on. So could be worse.
Could be worse.
take it out of presentation mode, if you would be so kind. I'm hoping this gives you some idea of what you're going to be looking at as you try to find that first pass of as you try to find that first pass. So there we go. Good job. And come out of presentation mode, if you would.
Let us.
Excellent. So, I'm going to hope that when I download on the 1st of April, that my family search, my name search works. If it doesn't, I hate to admit this, I'm going to wait the 4.5 months till the formal name search is done. I'm going to spend my time immediately going to Family Search or Ancestry and volunteering and doing the indexing that we can do there, because I don't want to mess with all this. But the reality is, good, you might want to mess with it, or you might want to enlist the help of your husband or a friend or somebody to try to get you to walk through those things. But just know that they're there. But the nice thing is to bear in mind, if you can catch it, and it was Family Search that was, or Ancestry, one of them, that was going to try to, if you volunteered to help them index, you could pick the enumeration district that you could do. So if you know where your family was and what enumeration district, you could be the person who does the reviewing that's necessary above the AI that the computer does. And you can correct any mistakes and make sure that it's done correctly. You can come to the National Archives right now and get those blank forms. You can see some educational videos. Tomorrow, watch the Roots Tech ones that are available and see if there's anything that you want to catch on there, because that could be very helpful that you were there. One other thing I wanted to mention is that in the 1940 census, you remember that on the left-hand page, that page is called 1A, and the right-hand page is the same people that's on 1A, but the rest of the questions, and that's called page 1B. The 1950 census is differently paginated. Your page 1A, your one page, does not have a corresponding page to the right. Everything that you're going to see is going to be on that page unless they were some of those special censuses, the sample questions. They'll be on the back of that page. So the numbering system on pages aren't going to be the same that we've been used to in the past, but it's something to be aware of, and it still works to do that. So we're going to take it off of presentation mode. And we're going to put up that last slide. We're going to go back to share.
Okay.
And we're going to put up the last slide. And if you've got any questions, we're going to put it up right here and try to answer them right now. I see some of you going, oh my gosh, I'm going to just wait 4.5 months till the name search comes available.
Yeah, amen.
And that's okay. I thought, and how hard can this be? Well, after 3 weeks of preparing, it is tricky, but it's not impossible. So I don't want to discourage you by throwing all that information out. Any questions, comments, observations? I just thought of something else too. Remember in the 1940 census, whoever gave the information to the enumerator had a little X next to their name and a circle. I loved that, because if the person giving that information out in the 1940 census to the enumerator was the 18-year-old, 16-year-old kid, and that was the only person that they had, it probably wasn't as accurate as if it had been the mom or the dad. They're not doing that anymore in the 1950 census. So you don't know who gave that information. Any questions? Brother Johnson, is there any questions typed in?
There aren't any typed in, but I think Brother Call had a question, maybe.
Okay. Brother Call, what was your question? Observation, comment, correction?
You need to unmute.
Unmute. What did I do? What did I say?
You had your little hand was raised on your,
Oh,
is that an
hey,
accident?
I want a clarification that came about a little bit later about the statistics, the accuracy and so on, down to the 1%. But anyway, that would pretty much clear it up.
Yeah, that's what the National Archives estimate that it was within, it was like 1.4% accuracy. That's how many was missed out of all the people.
Yeah. Okay.
Which you don't think is very many until you think that there's 151 million people.
Yeah, for 150 million people, you know, it's do make a difference. All right, thank you.
I think Sister Hauser may have had a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious. My name, my first name, the way it's spelled, it's ADA, frontwards or backwards. But seriously, I've seen my name misspelled so many times. If I notice the 1950 census, when they finally get it all out, if they misspelled it, how do I, if you heard anything about it? I could say, hey, you misspelled my name. I want it corrected. This is going down in posterity here.
Exactly. There's some, they're gonna, one of the things they mentioned in the presentation at 4 o'clock was that Family Search was going to do a check on there. So you could select, if you knew what enumeration district you were from, your family was from, you can select that enumeration district and go through it all and make sure that everything was as correct as possible.
So
That'll be
then,
hard, because considering I was only a couple of months old at the time.
and that's another point. There's a separate schedule. We didn't bring this up. And Brother Hauser, since you were a little person then, if you were born in January of 1949 till,
Well, if you were born, when they did the enumeration, if you were not a year old when they did the enumeration, you will be put in by the month that you were born in.
and not
So if,
years or part of
yeah,
it.
so if you were born in December
Which I
of
was.
1949, you'll be in as your name with DEC on it instead of
Deceased.
no.
I'm
It's the
joking.
month. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is a separate schedule for infants born within that enumeration time. And some of the enumerators used it and some didn't. So if you were one of those sample numbers, you were one of those 5 lines that were sampled, you may have more information put on the enumeration schedule, that extra schedule that they had.
Well, I happen to be born in Los Angeles County, which, you know, even back then was considered a large county. So
It is. So you're going to need to know your enumeration district. Do you know by chance, did you live in the same house in 1940? Your parents that they did when you were born in 1940?
no, my parents were in North Carolina till 2 weeks before I was born.
You're going to be a tough one. You're
No,
going to be a tough one.
I don't think so. If she knows her address at that time.
Oh,
That's
You mentioned that Stephen Morse,
yes.
his website, I think it's stephenmorse.org. It's called One Step Genealogy.
Yep.
And it is very easy to find an enumeration district on that. It's also good for immigration records.
Excellent.
But that could be an excellent and extremely helpful website.
And this is a picture of it right there. That's his website.
We can't see your picture.
And there's a lot more to it also,
Yeah.
whenever you get into it, but is extremely helpful.
Yeah. I was impressed with these 2 folks that did all this work on it. He's one of them on the sources. Thank you for that, Brother Hauser.
You know, and something else I have to say, I'm impressed with. I am extremely impressed with tonight's presentation. Good job. No, great
thank
job.
you.
Great
Yes.
job.
Very
Well,
much so.
thank you. Well, you're our test audience because our ward mission leader's been nagging us. And so nobody fell asleep. So or got up and walked
What-
away and said, forget this. You know?
It helps if there's some resources out there like the enumerator's book that helps a lot on when you get it there, because for instance, there's one on the education,
27 pages. He read them.
on the education part. If it's an S, they would put an S1 and so forth down to 12. That's your, elementary school and high school information. And then they put down C for college, and then it went through 1 through 5, 5 being you went to a graduate school. So that gets kind of interesting on those kind of parts and stuff.
We never knew all the details about the coding that you see, those numbers that are on there. Whenever we've looked at previous censuses, 1940 and that, I've always said, well, what are these numbers over here? And they go, oh, that's just the enumerator's numbers. There's a reason that those are there. There was a reason for that. So it's sort of amazing. But yeah, I hope my family, as one of the 5 sample questions, and I hope my family was picked up correctly from the electronic AI. Just imagine in 10, 20 years when we look back at this, we're going to say, remember in those old days when they had to have indexers, and they won't have them anymore, perhaps. But they are really hard, really, really hard ancestry and family search, looking for people that are called reviewers. So not just indexers, but reviewers that review what the computers have tried to analyze. So Sister Hauser, you'll be able to see whatever they butcher your name as, and then hopefully you'll be able to
Well, my
correct.
mother's was an unusual spelled name too. Her name was Isla, I-L-A.
Oh, and an I and an A are going to look a little bit alike.
And the
so-
I and the L, but yeah, she's in there all sorts of ways.
Yeah, in the 1930 census, which was the only census that showed her brother and she with their parents, because they were both orphaned by 1943, that they misspelled my grandmother's name, my mother's name,
Mhm.
and it caused all sorts of interesting things. So that's why I'm so conscious of that. Here's my first census. And I care about how my mother's name is accurately spelled as well as my own, because that's for the ages.
I'm a little curious how that's going to work out. I'm afraid it might turn out to be the family search kind of thing, where one person has the correct thing and then 50 people are going to be changing it. My dad has a delayed birth certificate, for a long story. And between the time of his baptism and the time that he needed the certificate when he was 18, World War II occurred. And there was a certain amount in the United States of anti-German response to things.
Mhm.
And so his name changed from Carl, K-A-R-L, to Carl, C-A-R-L. And his middle name changed from Wilhelm to William. And that happens in lots of different circumstances. But for him, it was especially hard because all of his school records are with K, and all of the previous records and his registration for the draft is with Carl, K, and Wilhelm. But all of a sudden, his legal name, when they did the delayed birth certificate in 1952, everything became Carl with a C and William. And so I know the pain. And he was listed as a female on the 1940 census.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to changing his gender to the appropriate gender. You know.
Well, see, one of the things people look at with census records is like when I noticed the 1930 census, in Ancestry at the time, and I noticed my mother's and my grandmother's names were misspelled. I made notations in there. And the thing is, they're just considered notes. People don't always look at the whole picture. So people just look at that and say, oh, her name was my mother's maiden name was W. And they had it down as Dins when they transcribed it because of the person's handwriting. And here I give documentation, the correct documentation. It's never corrected. It's just like a footnote down there, which people are not really going to pay attention to. They're just going to look at that document and say, oh, that's all I need, when that document, even though it's a census record, it's wrong. And when it's your own family, you take it personally. And I think that's what we all feel like you are with your dad, wanting to make sure things are correct.
Mhm.
Well, it gives you the opportunity.
Whether they listen or not, that's another story.
Do we have any other questions for the Perkins with their presentation this evening? Is there anybody else that would like to get a clarifying comment or suggest something that we might all consider?
Watch Roots Tech.
Yeah, thank you.
It's what I found when I was doing things was it's very difficult to find this form that's legible, because it's most of them are just so grainy you can't even read them. So if anybody wants this form, we'll be happy to send it to them.
It's grainy on the narrow too.
But
On the narrow too.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, it's very, very grainy.
That's too bad.
Thank you, Perkins, for the wonderful presentation. We do appreciate your effort
Thank you.
and all your research and appreciate